Hello, and welcome to our latest podcast on the state of cost of living in the country. So this week or this month, Hannah and I are joined by Louise Etherden, who is going to focus on specifically what's going on in the grocery sector. We touched on this last month, that there are obviously we're all heavily impacted by the cost of living, and grocery is a sector that we probably haven't spent as much time as we want to do. So today, a deep dive on that. So welcome, Louise. And let's start. What's the big issues going on in that area?
So I think the single biggest thing is food price inflation. We've had a number of years, if you go back, quite a long time, where food price inflation has been around the zero mark. It's sort of hovered up or even been negative at various points, but it's really rocketed in the last, particularly the last year, but especially over the last few months, where it's now tracking at about 19%, which is far, far higher than I think it has been for a long, long time. So people are really starting to feel the impact of that. I know some data from the ONS shows that for the last sort of at least the last year, if not a little longer, about half of people have been starting to buy less food to try to moderate how much they're spending on food. But there's a limit to how much you can cut that back, and we're now definitely starting to see that it is coming through in how much people are having to spend on food.
So I know that you captured data from transactional feeds from banks. Are you seeing that average transaction values are up 19% as inflation, or is what you're saying that it mirrors what you've seen in that sort of people are buying less?
They are definitely starting to really kick up. So the number of transactions is relatively stable. It's gone up a little bit, suggesting that people are shopping a little bit more frequently. But the biggest change is, especially over the last few months, we have seen that kick in the average transaction value. I'm not sure it's quite at the full height of the 19%, but it's significantly up from where it has been.
That's really interesting. I was also doing some research on the ONS website just to look at some of the staples that we get, and the 19% is actually much more extreme in some specific food categories. I saw that broccoli was up 44%, baked beans 41%, bread 27%. So real staples in the food cupboard, by far kind of outstripping the kind of regular inflation levels. It's kind of really, really stark, and it's affecting lots of different food products in different way. I guess a question I wanted to ask you was about the different supermarkets and how they're kind of dealing with this. Do you, from your research, see that there are any winners or losers at the moment in that space?
I mean, without a doubt, the biggest winners have been the discounters. So Aldi and Lidl. Aldi, quite a few months ago now, overtook Morrison's to take fourth place, I should say, as in the sort of the big four supermarket retailers. But Aldi and Lidl in particular going really well. It's been at the expense of some of the biggest supermarkets, so particularly Morrison's. Tesco's dropped down as well. But there's definitely been a big shift, and the single biggest trend has been that the discounters are just doing so much better than they were before relative to the others.
And is that consistent online and offline in terms of what you've looked at?
No, there are definitely some differences with what's happening online and offline. So if you look, if you look at pure in-store sales, we're seeing evidence that Aldi have now overtaken Sainsbury's as well, in particular over the last few months. So I think Sainsbury's did well again over Christmas, but there was a period before Christmas and after Christmas where actually Aldi in-store seems to be doing more than Sainsbury's. We're also seeing some evidence that there are certain groups that are starting to switch to shopping in store more than online. So in particular, it's groups like the executive wealth, mature money, countryside communities that seem to be dropping their online spend and increasing their in-store spend in its place. So we are definitely seeing a bit of switching, a slight trend that some of the lowest affluence groups are starting to shop online a bit more as well. Probably gives them a bit more ability to sort of control their budgets and manage overall spend as well. So yeah, there's definitely a bit of switching going on between which groups are shopping online and in store, with the general, definitely some tendencies for certain groups to be shopping in store more.
And what's your assumption of why they're shopping in store more? Is it to take up offers and to reduce their delivery costs? Is that where it's going?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's hard to say. I mean, it might be that they're able to just sort of feeling like they're controlling their spend a bit more, and maybe whether that's turning into more frequent shops in store rather than bigger shops online, for example. It's hard to say exactly what's driving that, but it definitely seems to be a bit of a trend across the board in the data that we're seeing.
There are also discounts that you can pick up in store that aren't necessarily on the website as well, aren't there? You can kind of find big yellow stickers that aren't necessarily on the website. That could be something to do with it, couldn't it?
Yeah, could be that, and just again, trying to sort of that feeling that you've got more control over the money that you're spending when you're in store potentially.
So is it only the discounters that are doing well? Is it as simple as that? Discount good, high value bad?
No, there are definitely some retailers that are bucking that trend. So in particular, we've seen Marks and Spencer's and American Simply Food doing particularly well. They had an amazing Christmas, but actually they've managed to sustain that. So they've definitely grown relative to the rest of the market over the last few months. We've also seen the likes of Ocado doing well. But again, it's interesting, their groups are slightly changing. So they've always had a real stronghold with some of those most affluent groups, but actually some of those groups are ever so slightly dropping away and being replaced by some of the sort of more mid-affluent groups. Some slight shifts in the makeup there, again fitting with that sort of online behaviour that we've been seeing. But Marks and Spencer's and Ocado definitely slightly bucking the trend when it comes to what we're seeing with the other retailers.
So is that the what we saw in the last recession, that same sort of, I'll treat myself to this meal rather than go out? Is that what you'd speculate is going on there?
Yeah, there could be a bit of that, because I think maybe linked to that, we've also seen the likes of Majestic Wine doing very well. Okay. And whether that's people, spending time at home and entertaining at home or drinking at home more than going out, which could be linked to similar sort of behaviours to when you might, like you say, treat yourself to something, Marks and Spencer's meal deal or whatever it might be. But it could well be connected as a sort of trade down from potentially a night out.
That's really interesting. A couple of new players that came onto the scene just after the pandemic, so Getir and Gorillas, who did really well kind of during the pandemic and immediately post. They've had obviously a more mixed set of results since we've all kind of returned to physical space. How are they getting on in this current climate?
Yeah, they're really interesting ones, because they are, I think a lot of people are talking about them, and I think they're just a very turbulent set of retailers. So they very much trade, both of them sort of trade much more with the city sophisticates and struggling estates, so much more sort of London focused groups, and you can just see that there's a lot of chopping and changing. As one goes up, the other goes down, and probably is driven by whatever offers they happen to have on, or which one's doing the right promotions. But they're not necessarily growing that much as an overall category, but there's just a lot of switching going on between them. So it's very choppy and still definitely stabilizing.
Right, thank you so much, Louise. So if I were to end your section now with, what would you say to summarize? What's the overall pattern that you're seeing in the sector?
Yeah, so I think the single biggest thing, that food price inflation is just so high and so much higher than we have been used to. So we are definitely seeing that coming through in those, like you say, those average transaction values, how much people are spending on food, and it is now really coming through in the spend. People have cut what they can cut. It's now pure increase in spend. The discounters are just, definitely the sort of standout story. They're doing much, much better than the other retailers. I think it is just that across the board, value is still so important. The cost of living is still such a big priority, and especially with the food price inflation being where it is, that it's just very, very competitive out there. And price, it's all about price.
Okay, thank you. So Hannah, I know that you've just completed the latest survey of customer sentiment. Does that back up what you're seeing there?
Yeah, 100%. Louise just said price is the most important thing. Yes, it is for customers as well. 85% of customers said that they're worried about rising costs, specifically things like food inflation, and the cost of clothing and other things like that. 84% of people are still really concerned about energy bills, and then it kind of tails off. But in terms of people worried about kind of global instability, and lots of other things that's happening at the moment. But cost is by far the most worrying thing for consumers. That's mainly driven by the young as well. So we're seeing kind of the younger generation you are, the more worried you are about all of that stuff, and the kind of higher it is on your list of concern. Another interesting thing that came out when kind of looking at how people are saving compared to when we asked the question in January, we found that the older you were, you tended to be ploughing a lot more money into your safety buffer fund, and the younger you were, the more likely you were to be putting money into a kind of specific pot of money on a major expenditure. So, for example, a holiday, getting married, buying a house, all the kind of things that people save up for. And the big difference we've seen, the movement in the last 4 months, those pots for something specific are declining amongst young people, and their safety buffers are growing. So people are being realistic about what they're actually going to be able to afford to do this year. Things like buying a house and other kind of major life events are being put on hold, and you can see that all the way through the survey. So people are being much more conservative with their spending where they can.
Thank you so much. That really useful summary. And thank you to both of you for joining us today on this podcast. Next month, we're going to be launching our new Acorn. So for those of you who've followed CACI for a long time, it's our major classification of consumers. We do a major rebuild of it every 10 years, even though we update it annually. We're going to be looking at some of our latest metrics on all things cost of living with a sort of lens of what does that mean from an Acorn point of view. So we look forward to catching up with you then. Otherwise, see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.